the bell. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Scarlet Fu, joined now by our colleagues, Matt Miller and Carol Massar. We're counting you down to the closing bell. Here to take us beyond the bell. I'm all confused today, Carol Massar. I mean, the words are right there in front of me, but you know what? I just get so caught up in just your wisdom and just the grace presence that you and Matt Miller bring to the table every day. Yeah.
No, so only kidding.
I don't buy it.
Love it, love it, love it. We're not that easy. We're not that easy. Interesting market, right? I mean, it just feels like investors are willing to buy into it, whether it's some of the big tech names. Dow, though, the outperformer, so I'm not sure what that tells us, Matt.
Yeah, that
Among
is
the major
interesting.
indices.
Actually, I hadn't even noticed that because I don't tend to look at it that much.
Hence my wisdom, as Romaine
But you're right.
Bostick
The Dow's
pointed
up
out.
362 points, more than 1%, and the S&P and the Nasdaq are only up about 0.75%. It is really a story of the banks giving some optimism to the trade this morning, and then I think a handoff, is that a better way to put it? A handoff to tech with the Meta Microsoft announcement on AI that really continued to drive markets higher.
And better breadth overall. You have the Dow Industrials and the Russell 2000 outperforming the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq, which is what everyone said you needed to see in order for this rally to be a little bit more sustainable, the participation of these unloved stocks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about this idea of getting that breadth here, and I know, Matt, you were sort of poo-pooing a little bit earlier some of the advances in the bank stocks because they weren't necessarily the big point contributors here, but you go through the big percentage gainers here on the day, and we're not talking about AI. We're not necessarily talking about big tech. We're talking about material stocks. We're talking about healthcare stocks. We're talking about financials, and I think for some folks, that's a good thing.
Romaine, can I just say I adore you? Thank you for saying that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And you know, and we just, I mean, just real quick, let's get through the bells here. We do get the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and we should point out, not just outperformance on the day, up 1% on the day, about 360 points, right around that 35,000 level. It's on a 7-day win streak. This is the longest win streak for Dow Industrials going back to early 2021. The S&P 500 up about 0.7% on the day, now firmly above that 4,500 level. And then you go over on the board here to the Nasdaq Composite, 7 to 0.8% here. So we're talking again, a broad-based rally. You flip it up, you look at the Russell 2000, a gain of 1.3% on the day. Transports up 2% on the day here. So look, there's a lot to nitpick over, but overall, if you just take it at face value, this was a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. Optimism and risk on in a lot of different sectors. I'm going to go back to the big banks, if I may. In the bank sector overall, just looking at the KBW going there, all 24 names, Matt, finishing higher for the day, and that index up more than 3% in the trade.
Taking a look at the groups that are up, obviously IT is the biggest gainer in terms of the industry groups here, but you do have financials close on their heels, up more than 1%. Energy also up about 1%. In terms of the losers, retail, utilities, and consumer staples. So a real differentiation there between defensive and aggressive stocks. Is that fair?
I don't know that they get
I
aggressive.
think that's called growth, right?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, growth.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. They went to therapy.
The
They
growthier
went from
stocks.
aggressive to being growth.
By the way, it's
I
so
know.
cool that the
Aggressive just
transports are up
sounds, I don't know.
2%. Do you know who taught me about Dow transportation theory? Was Carol, like 20 years ago.
Did I do?
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the sandbox, right?
Dow theory.
All right, let's get to it. All right.
That's funny.
Let's get to some of the individual gainers. Let's talk about the banks. Charles Schwab, number one gainer in the S&P 500, just finishing off its highs, up about 12.5%. Executives there suggesting the worst is over for the brokerage. We know we saw this with the regional bank meltdown, if you will, or fallout, and that certainly weighed on Charles Schwab as well. But nonetheless, number one in the S&P 500, again, up 12.5%. Morgan Stanley, number three gainer in the S&P 500, up 6.5%, following its results. Company really wealth management and outperformer for that company. That really kind of weighed over the slump that they saw in investment banking. Then you've got Microsoft, my gift to Matt Miller today, up about 4% off its highs of the session, but I believe hitting a record high, certainly intraday, and I think possibly...
Yeah, it did close at a record high, yeah.
Thank you. So Microsoft up just about 4% in today's session, coming out, giving pricing details for its corporate artificial intelligence tools, if you will. And then I just do want to mention Old Dominion. It was up about 2.8%. We saw a rally in a lot of the LTL transportation companies. You saw this, Cowen, concerns about Yellow Corporation, maybe a dispute with the Teamsters.
Yeah, and we should point out that news broke just in the last hour. Those Teamsters at Yellow did vote to actually strike. strike here, which I think is set to begin on the 24th. And of course, the assumption is a lot of business will move to the other less than truckload carriers.
Yeah, Dominion, XPO, and Saia all gaining in today's session.
Yeah, labor disputes increasingly becoming a theme in this economy. Let's take a look at some of the decliners. Prologis is one of the worst performers in the S&P 500. The industrial landlord opened higher on better than expected top line and bottom lines, but it quickly erased its gain after second quarter results showed occupancy falling below analyst estimates. And Visa and MasterCard both down about 1%. The pair face a new antitrust lawsuit alleging that they conspired to vastly overcharge the Square payment platform, and that resulted in higher retail prices paid by consumers. The suit was filed on July 14th. And Massimo, which is a hospital equipment maker, plunging 20% after pre-announcing its second quarter revenue missed analyst estimates due to delayed orders, lower than expected U.S. hospital inpatient flow, and strained hospital budgets.
Let's get a quick check on what's going on in the yield space. Not a whole lot going on for a change there. Two-year yield slightly higher here on the day by about 1 to 2 basis points. And then to the downside, you're looking at about 1 to 2 basis points on the 10, the 20, and the 30-year yield. Put it all together, and basically we kind of remain unchanged, at least on the trajectory of that yield curve.
All right, so do we want to mention Omnicom earnings?
Yeah, let's. I mean, we do have a couple of kind of secondary
Yeah.
earnings. I've been keeping an eye on Omnicom, which is a big kind of advertising, a commercialization platform. Their earnings are out. The shares are down. The 2Q numbers on an EPS basis looks like they did beat $1.81. The street was looking for $1.79, but the revenue numbers coming in a little bit light, guys, at about $3.61 billion. The street, on average, was looking for about 3.7.
Yeah, and Romaine, it's a stock that would hit, a 52-week high in today's session. It's up about 20% for the year. But as you mentioned, we're seeing some pressure in the aftermarket now, down about 5%, Matt.
Yeah, so we'll continue to follow any of these earnings when they break. Romaine, as you say, they're not any huge companies scheduled to come out right now, but we're at the beginning of earnings season, so we're going to start seeing a slew of these come across the ticker.
Yeah, and just real quickly too on Omnicom, because one reason I looked, everyone's concerned about ad spending, right? We saw a Trade Desk, which was down today, but then you had that upgrade on Pinterest, which was that sell-side analyst was basically making the case that there is a lot of digital ad upside, at least for certain companies out there here. So, I mean, I guess this is probably dating myself, but when I started my career, one of the sort of economic tea leaves you always looked at was ad spending, because it was kind of an indicator maybe of where businesses at least felt the economy was going. I think
it's still the case.
We have the numbers for what happened in the quarter that just ended, but really the outlook is going to be critical here because this is what companies are planning for in terms of spending and how they're going to budget for the rest of the year, for early next year. And cost cutting is very much the theme, and that's helping drive a lot of the
There's
results.
more earnings out. You like trucks, Matt?
JB Hunt? Yeah.
Always.
You know I like trucks.
Maybe Scarlett and I like trucks.
Okay, well, sure. Well, you want to go for it?
Do you like trucks?
No,
I
she's not ready. Carol Massar, 181 on 2Q EPS for JB Hunt. That's a miss. Operating revenue coming in at $3.13 billion. That's a miss. Intermodal revenue coming in at $1.49 billion. That's a miss. And dedicated revenue coming in at $88.7 million. That's also a miss. Shares down 2%.
That's interesting. So my takeaway from this, JB Hunt management does not know how to guide analysts. Because you've got to push your analysts down if you're going to miss those numbers.
They should have been doing it in the weeks leading up to this so that by the time they came in, they were beating a lowered bar.
They should hire Goldman Sachs.
What's the visibility, though? I mean, because it's easy to say, okay, they should have done this, right? But we talk about just how hard it is to read this economy, right? You get an economic data point on one day that shows strength, and then the next day you get something that shows weakness. How much does that complicate what these CEOs and CFOs have to forecast?
It's so funny that you say that. We were just talking with Mace McCain. He's over at Frost Investment Advisors. He looks at the Bloomberg Economics Growth Data Surprise Index, which has shown how data has, for a long time, for several months now, continued to surprise to the upside. We're kind of just turning over the top of that, but he has used as an indicator about kind of when to get into the market. But he kind of feels like, right at this point, Matt, maybe pulling back on some of those growth stories because he thinks maybe we've seen some of the best data points.
He's taken some of those profits, and he wants to move into fixed income, and he wants to move at the curve. So I think that's what we're hearing from a lot of investment advisors lately.
You also wonder how much these CFOs think that they can maybe move things around and make the numbers look a little bit better in the early days of the new quarter as they finalize their numbers, right? I mean, they have visibility in terms of how things ended in the quarter, but they have room to kind of play around in terms of whether they're going to make a charge for something, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, most of them do, and it'll be interesting. I think, Matt, you were just kind of Matt or Carol, you were just referencing kind of whether you sandbag or whether you sort of set the bar low so you can move to the upside. I don't know if that was in reference to Goldman specifically, but you know, we get those earnings tomorrow, and that was all the discussion last week. That story saying that they're basically kind of softly guiding people lower, and was that significant, or was this them just really just trying to prime the pump?
Exactly. It's a really good point. I just want to mention John Wren, CEO over at Omnicom, while the balance of the year will continue to see economic uncertainty. And then he says more things. So getting a little bit in terms of his thoughts on the outlook.
More things.
More things.
I mean, when haven't we
Always
seen
things.
economic uncertainty going forward? When was the last time you heard a CEO say our visibility is
Matt,
fantastic?
Banks mattered today. Right, guys? Banks mattered today.
Does
Banks
Matt
matter.
know that? Matt doesn't.
I agree that banks matter.
He hates banks.
I know. Why does he hate on
Carol's trying to draw me into this, and Romaine, you're egging her on.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. Thanks for joining us. We will see you again tomorrow.